and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us virtually tonight. The Engineering, Diversity, and Inclusion Council welcomes you to the 5th episode in our Walking the Walk Together panel series. These panels feature guest STEM and community leaders and are led by engineering students. It is our hope that these panels start conversations, educate allyship, and bring together all cultures and diversities to turn words into actionable steps to help move our community forward in a positive way.
This includes informing people who want to learn more about understanding their privilege and how to leverage it into allyship, as well as turning our understanding into actionable steps. Some of our previous panels have included discussion on amplifying voices, increasing representation and power structures in higher education from Creeth Burke in our episode 2.
Also, activism dealing with dual identity growing up and reproductive rights and reproductive justice in episode 3 by Fazila Siddiqui.
And in episode 4, voting and being heard and the right to be outdoors without being harassed and trying to be what you can't see by Melissa Marquez in episode 4. And those are just a few. All of the previous recordings we just mentioned are available and posted at www.scu.edu/engineering/diversity/council.
To introduce ourselves, my name is Rania Ansari, and I'm a sophomore from San Jose, California. I'm studying computer science, and I'm involved in SWE.
My name is Juliana Trujillo. I am an alumna of the class of 2020 from Aurora, Colorado. I'm currently a Ph.D. student at the University of Virginia, but I was previously involved in SHIP at SCU.
You can check out both of these clubs on Instagram at SCU SWE and at SHIP_SCU. Just to lay out a few house rules, we want to make sure that all our Santa Clara students watching live on Zoom, please keep your video and your microphone off. But please remember the chat room is open and we invite you to use it if you have any questions throughout the event. For everyone watching our live stream across the world, there is a Google form on the webpage for you to submit any questions throughout the event as well.
So just to emphasize, please feel free to throw any questions you may have in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. But now it's time to introduce our guest panelists.
We are honored to have 4 panelists with us for our panel today, who are from all over the country, to bring various points of view on the issues at hand. Panelists, as we say your name, it would be great if you could also take about a minute to tell the audience a little bit about who you are. Let's start with Naeem Turner Bondali.
Hi, my name is Naeem Turner Bondali. I am an SCU alum of the class of 2018, and I'm dedicated to reducing power and energy disparities in underserved communities, improving K-12 STEM literacy, and increasing minority opportunities in STEM. I work towards those objectives by modeling and analyzing our electric power grid as a Ph.D. candidate in electrical and computer engineering at Carnegie Mellon University, by telling stories that encourage youth as an author, and by co-founding and serving in organizations committed to reducing the effects of income and wealth inequality and promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM. Finally, I just want to add that I'm incredibly excited to be here today. And I also like to thank Dr. Wilson in the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department for recommending me to participate. Thanks.
Thank you, Naeem. Next up, we have Uche Agwu.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Uche Agwu. I am a first-year PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University, and I'm also an SCU alum of 2018. I received my master's in mechanical engineering, also at CMU as well. And a little bit about me, I have continuously been involved with different organizations just to really promote issues relating to diversity and equity and inclusion. I did this throughout my time at Santa Clara University through organizations like the National Society of Black Engineers, as well as EGWE. And I'm continuing to do that here at Carnegie Mellon University through our department and through our administration as well. So again, thank you so much for bringing me here today. I'd also like to thank Dr. Tanya Nilsson just for inviting me to come today and speak to everyone. So thanks again.
Thank you, Uche. Up next, we have Frank Pena.
Hi, everybody. My name is Frank Pena. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am a junior at San Jose State University, studying sociology with an emphasis on women and gender studies. I'm also the outreach coordinator and speakers bureau coordinator at the LGBTQ Youth Space. And I'm super passionate about working with not only the queer community, but I'm really passionate about creating intersectional spaces outside of our youth center and anywhere. And so that's something that's really important to me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Frank. Lastly, we have Michelle Moore.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle from Tampa, Florida. I'm an educator first and passionate about ensuring that all students have access to STEM learning experiences in and outside the classroom from as early age as possible. That includes work with code.org and our local STEM network. Basically, I want everyone to not only have the access to those resources and experiences, but also make sure that they feel that they belong in those classrooms, whether it's an AP computer science class or going up into grad school and getting in a Ph.D. program. Everybody deserves a seat at the table and to have the confidence to know that they earned their space there.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you to all of our panelists for their introductions. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. These questions are really for anyone, but please don't feel obligated to respond to each question, but feel free to jump in if you're interested in answering.
So to start off, all of you are obviously involved and have been involved in diversity efforts in your various fields and locations. So how have you seen a lack of diversity and inequality affect you and your community? Anybody can start speaking.
Well, I can go. So I think with me, I originally come from Denver, Colorado, and the community I come from was known as Montbello. And for the longest time, there was always this sort of issue where people always had a negative stigma of it. And for some reason, I never really understood it because I enjoyed my time there. It was really only when I went to spaces where I was, again, the minority, such as my high school, for example. And I think one thing that I had to realize was people had this misunderstanding of that area or that place or those people just because, again, it was a place of it was a dense population of minority people. And so because of that, that affected how people saw me, and it affected how my friends and my family saw themselves going into different positions of whether it be engineering or going into the medical field. It creates this barrier that you need to overcome that not everyone has to actually experience just because, again, they haven't had that opportunity. And so I think one thing that a lack of diversity causes is this barrier between, oh, okay, I can see myself in this position because I see other people like me that are also there as well. And if you don't have that reinforcement and those individuals to back you up to get there, then that's how you see these issues of imposter syndrome and not feeling as if you're enough.
I'd like to chime in if I can and concur with Uche about noticing the lack of representation in my own community and in how it impacts my own sense of self-worth and my own pursuit of engineering and of STEM, but I'd also like to tackle a different angle if I can, and when I think about how a lack of diversity affects my community, I think about how the products and services that are developed by scientists and engineers do not always cater towards our underrepresented populations, whether that's AI technologies that directly target Black and brown people, or that's something as simple as camera and facial detection, not noticing how to recognize darker skin tones. So when I think about it from that lens, and I think about how some of the wealthiest and most powerful countries have such a large influence over us, but we have no say in how they impact us.
Thank you, Naeem and Uche. This is a specific question for Frank. What can the community and school do to ensure that mental health and safety of students who are part of the LGBTQ plus community are up to par? And what can we do to make sure that these students are being heard?
Of course. So I think really the first thing is educating yourself. There's so many resources out there for schools to educate. Starting with myself, like I'm a person that can go to your school and provide trainings to help up the competency to provide safer spaces for LGBTQ youth in school campuses. Additionally, is that it's mostly systemic that we see the rights of like queer and trans students at stake in their campuses, such as what right, are they safe when they go to the restroom, and which they align with. And so I always think of like education and really like, the students on the campus, like they're already speaking. It's more of the faculty and staff need to listen and need to really take action into allyship. And I don't want to kind of jump ahead of questions, but that's a really, big piece of my driving force is saying like, allyship isn't, just saying I'm an ally of LGBT community. It's a verb. It's a form of action, and that's something I really drive home when I'm engaging with like teachers and faculty on school campuses. And I think I'm remembering the second part of the question. You can.
Yeah, I can repeat it.
Please.
What can we do to make sure that these students are being heard?
Yes. So again, listen. They're already speaking.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Thanks.
Michelle, this is specific for you. 74% of middle school girls express an interest in STEM, but only 0.4% choose a computer science major when they get to college, as reported by Girls Who Code. And the numbers only get lower as factors such as race are played in. What can we as a university and community do to inspire young women to feel confident in pursuing a career in STEM?
I love that question, and I love Girls Who Code and Black Girls Code. They're great organizations because they're giving girls those experiences to feel confident. Just like our panelists earlier said, they have to feel that they belong. But it's also, going back to Frank's point, creating a safe, inclusive space when they are there. So we know that there are more girls signing up for computer science in high school, but those same girls aren't necessarily picking it as a major at the university level. So now we've removed the barrier of not having access to that type of learning and experiences, but they're still not picking it. And one of the reasons, a big reason, depends on their experience in that high school course. So when they are in the computer science classroom, do they feel like they are contributing to the solutions and the problems that are being solved? Or is there something going on either with the teacher or maybe the ratio of the class that's making them feel like they don't belong, or they create their own biases of what they think computer science in the real world may look like, and they decide it's not for them. So we really need to make sure we're using inclusive curriculum and having lots of opportunities for teacher PD training so that every teacher can identify the biases that are happening in their own class in the moment and address them so that it doesn't impact everyone's lasting impression of computer science or what it means to be a girl in a computer science class.
May I add to Michelle? I always think about language and how that really matters, LGBT people aside. But, specifically in this instance, I think of maybe you do have a young girl who is interested in STEM. And often the comment that I've heard, said is like, oh, good luck, you're going to be the only girl in your class. Or good luck, you're going to be the only girl that works, for said company, right? And it's like, is that really encouraging, right? So I feel like our language can be shifted and encouraging and showing that, that it's actually great, like you should, and more shifting that language. And then also, again, kind of going into representation, right? How is STEM portrayed for women, on TV shows or in, any kind of educational form. But I always think about TV shows about the one girl who works for Apple and, has this experience. And so representation really matters, and how you're also portraying that representation, really goes a long way.
Thank you for those thoughts. So Michelle, you touched on it, but, and this is open again for anyone, but do you have suggestions for how to really codify these diversity efforts into systemic change towards encouraging girls in STEM and allowing for LGBTQ representation and understanding there, as well as for diversity in STEM, especially in higher education?
I'll go first and people can feel free to piggyback. So I do want to say there are frameworks for this type of work. It's not just like we're all going to get together and sing Kumbaya, and it just depends on what framework your institution wants to work with. I'm a big fan of the Equity Literacy Institute led by Paul Gorski. One of the first steps that he has institutions do is list out all the ways that we're being inequitable. So back to Frank's point, for creating those inclusive environments, we really need to identify, when are people not feeling included? Do they feel safe when they go to the restroom? Do girls feel welcomed in computer science, engineering, or STEM related classes? Or what other groups might be marginalized based on our schedule, the demographics in the class, even the layout of the campus, and so many other factors. So really brainstorming and getting a diverse group together to have those diverse lenses look at, where are we being inequitable? Who are we leaving out? How can we really identify every marginalized group? And it may go beyond race and gender. It could be socioeconomic status, neurodiversity. There are so many things that we need to look at. And that's why the more people you bring together, the better, because everyone's going to have a different experience on your campus, whether it's a student, professor, custodian, or someone serving lunch.
I completely agree with Michelle, and I'd just like to add on, if I can, and also tie in the fact that Santa Clara was focusing here on Santa Clara University, which is a Jesuit Catholic institution. And Santa Clara's mission is all about social justice. It's about men and women for others. And I think when organizations recognize or reevaluate and reexamine their missions and tie those into their goals and objectives, that you can actually achieve better outcomes for diverse students. And I think that it also starts with challenging students to live out the mission and history of their institution. So here at Santa Clara, making sure that every student is actually living what it means to be a man and woman for others. Many of us here do that, but not all of us do. And I think that's something an institution can codify as an example. And as just another final piece to that, I would add that in general, any institution should seek to have a resilient strategic and tactical initiatives for addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Otherwise, if you don't have both tactical and strategic strategies, you're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add that I think a big important thing of incorporating these actual systems that would really change the culture of a university or any other type of organization is really trying to be proactive instead of reactive. I think one thing that I've noticed, especially during the summer with everything that happened with George Floyd, obviously it was great to see people actually trying to actually make a difference. So you hear a lot of organizations looking into how they can help organizations such as Black Lives Matter, anything related to that. However, again, that was all reactive, and it was all it all only happened because of the death of another Black man that we typically see within the U.S. And it's very hard because you see this and you're not sure, okay, what will be different. And so I think the biggest thing that universities and organizations have to keep in mind is listen to the students, because they've probably been saying these things for quite some time. Like what has been happening is not new. And so when you're listening to the students, really trying to implement those new programs to, again, become proactive so that you're not running into the situation of, okay, let's think of how we can do this because this happened. And so I think if they change that culture and they really try to create proactive and sustainable programs, I think that's the best way to go about solving it.
Thank you, panelists. Sort of on the same wavelength to that, how can we better support and uplift historically underrepresented students as an institution and as a community? And that's for anyone who would like to answer.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go again. I think the biggest thing is universities really have to know how to go about recruiting these individuals and letting them know that they are looking for students that are underrepresented. And obviously that doesn't mean that, oh, we're trying to make a quota. You really have to make sure that that is not your goal. They're obviously looking for talent, but at the same time, they're looking for the talent that they wouldn't typically find. Sometimes you'll hear that people say, oh, we can't find certain professors, or we can't find certain students that meet these guidelines. They're out there, and I think you just need to look hard enough. And I think, again, that's hiring the right people to actually perform those actions of actually reaching out and making connections with the community. It's very easy within any university setting to be trapped within some type of bubble to the point where you're really focused on the school, and things might be happening within the community, and it's very easy to block those off or sort of separate yourself from that. But I think universities have to really see themselves as part of the community. And through that, they also have to understand that as part of the community, that means you should be considering the different individuals, especially the underrepresented and disenfranchised that you're working with. And through that, I think, and with that understanding, you'd be able to set up initiatives and programs to actually recruit individuals to come to your university to really build up the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that you're trying to do.
I think Uche brought up an excellent point when he mentioned that the talent is out there. So we know, according to the American Society of Engineering Education and the Engineering Accreditation Board, that every year we graduate anywhere between 100,000 and 150,000 engineers. Of those engineers, anywhere from 3.3 to 4.3% are Black and African American. That percentage is small and absolutely needs to improve, but still, that's thousands of engineers, that's thousands of people ready and available to enter the workforce. And I think that speaks to what I see as sort of the issue with how universities tackle their efforts towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's that when they undertake these efforts, they're not at an institutional level, meaning that every department is engaged in the effort. And then secondly, their metrics that they are already using to track the success of the university are not directly tied to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that means retention, that means graduation, that means enrollment, anything related to revenue should be part of that. So if you really want to make a change, you're going to universities and leaders are going to have to be willing to really take a look at their metrics and how they can use those traditional metrics to fuel growth and diversity.
I'll piggyback off that. Also, as far as like being proactive and how do we really move forward, look at what is the university or what is the institution really celebrating. So I was fortunate enough, quick anecdote, to do a walkthrough for a district in Wisconsin, middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. And I walked through this high school, and every single display case, every single photo, anything in the hallways, flyer, promotional material for this school was sports related. Nothing for drama, nothing for art, nothing for any other club or anything. So when we think about our school newspaper, our journalism programs, the media that's being pushed out, the flyers that are being promoted around school, what does it say about your university? Is it targeting a certain audience, and is it isolating someone else? So if I am a Latina who wants to go to school to be an engineer, when I walk through your campus, am I going to feel welcomed? Am I going to see materials that make me feel welcomed? Or am I going to think, I don't know if this is the right fit for me?
And the final piece I'm always thinking about is, again, inclusivity in the representation in the school, right? So if we think about a student who's, touring, the campus and sees, maybe like a Black student union, right? Is that person who is Black and also queer going to feel not only welcomed, but celebrated and safe in those spaces, right? A lot of, queer people often have to choose of like, oh, should I go to the queer center, or do I, or I can only partake in some events there and some events in the Black Student Union, or maybe like La Raza, depending on what the group is called. But those are, things I'm thinking about, of that these spaces shouldn't be so segregated, but rather like inclusive of like marginalized communities. So, because it's, my favorite saying is tu lucha es mi lucha, and that's a part of like your hustle is my hustle, and that we have to, have to work together. And LGBT people, like, really kind of get outcasted outside of their own cultural communities. And so finding a way to circle them back in to their culture.
Thank you for those thoughts. So one thing that I've often struggled with is that these are things that I also believe in and I feel very passionate about. But sometimes actually getting these things to change culturally or systemically is difficult, because there's pushback from people who believe that the impact isn't as great as you think it is. So how do you go beyond just preaching to the choir? How do you go into having these discussions with people to help them understand these issues, and also get them to want things to change as well?
All right, I'm going to chime in first. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but this is my life. Like, right? I work with a lot of public school districts, and, nobody really wants to change for the most part. And there's usually a catalyst. So I mentioned that district in Wisconsin, they actually got some really bad press and it made national news. So they hired us to go in and kind of, that was part of their PR, like, oh, we're fixing it, right? So unfortunately, sometimes something bad has to happen to be the catalyst for something good, or for the systemic racism to really become undone. But another thing I like to do is I like to call on my white friends. So sometimes, my white friends can use their privilege to bring the conversation to the forefront. So if, me being the crazy Latina isn't working and the squeaky wheel isn't getting the oil, then I need to figure out a way to get somebody who someone else is listening to or willing to listen to make the noise for me and join me. I love that. Frank was just saying, tu lucha es mi lucha, because sometimes we need people to help us, especially when we're looking at students who want to cause institutional change. It's easy for the adults at the institution to say, well, it's too expensive, or that's not a priority right now, or we're not sure, how that fits in with our mission. So it's so important to go back to your mission, figure out what's going to get the adults or the change makers to really come to the table with open ears and listen. And maybe it's nothing bad has happened yet, but look at what's happened at these other schools and the changes that they made because of this. And don't we want to be proactive and be like them? The good thing about being a private university is, you are looking at enrollment and you are trying to bring more people in. So let's show everyone how progressive we are. Let's show everyone we are leading in this specific space, and we're going to make really proactive, radical change that's going to make so many more students want to come be a part of this movement.
That's an awesome answer. I think to add my own spin to it, I have sort of two different lenses through which I view it. One at an institutional level and two at a personal level, on how you can approach those conversations and get people engaged. At an institutional level, I know what's worked for Uche and I during our time at Santa Clara and engaging with organizations is starting first with facts and data. So when you come to the table with clear metrics and measurements, it's very hard to ignore the reality. You notice that people find it very difficult to just dismiss you automatically. And the second thing when you're dealing with institutions and organizations is looking at their missions, looking at what they say they value, and looking at their goals and objectives. And when you say, hey, you have goal X of being a very inclusive and representative diversity, but I see here that your Black or Latino population is only 3 or 4%, that doesn't square. So when you're dealing with institutions, again, facts. Second thing, looking at their mission, values, and objectives. On a personal level, I think the strategy that I like to take when I'm dealing with people who may not understand or fully comprehend where I'm coming from and what the issues are, I also start with facts, but I also try to listen to them and meet them on their level, because unless I engage with them directly, I can't fully understand their points. So I take time to listen, really understand what they're trying to say, and then that way I can then counteract whatever issues they may have.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think going off of what Naeem said, I think the biggest thing is really meeting people where they're at. And sometimes that won't be where you want them to be. But oftentimes, if you're trying to create this environment or this culture of understanding and being willing to actually listen to each other, at some point everyone obviously has to listen to each other and really try to understand each other as well. And so I think for me personally, it goes along the lines of what Naeem said, really first trying to understand where they're coming from, but then also before bringing in facts, trying to create, and not even create, just talk about your own life experiences and how those life experiences were real for you, and how that is then correlated to actual facts that have been seen within our society. And I think from there, I like this saying, all you can do is all you can do. You've done your part. If they still have issues with trying to understand, if you truly care about that person, then you can continue to, by all means, engage, always discuss your experiences and your views. But at some point, you also have to make sure that your mental health is fine. And so always being sure to take a step back and asking yourself, okay, is this really worth it? And this amount of time that I'm putting in to try to educate this person on not only my experiences, but the countless experiences that other people of color or other minorities have experienced. And if it's not working, is it worth it? And I think that whole concept can also be applied just to other organizations as well. I think it's very easy to want to direct all of your energy and your devotion to so many different initiatives and actions. However, you can only do so much. You can't spread yourself so thin. And so I think the biggest things that I've been telling people recently that I've been asking about, oh, how can I make an actual change, or what are some of the big things that I can do? I think you really just have to focus on one thing that you know you can do really well that can make long-term sustainable change. And once you're able to hone in on that thing, you do that to the best of your ability. And I think going in with that mindset, you're then able to really focus all your energy on that and do the best you can. And I think that's where you'll begin to see that change instead of trying to go in different routes and not making nearly as much change as you would if you were just to focus on one route.
I really want to echo what Michelle said. You know, I'm more, you know, maybe a little more radical. I really am. I encourage really people to have uncomfortable conversations because I feel like we've really lived. The progress has been so slow because we've done things at the mercy of other people's comfort. And, you know, in order for change to happen, you know, you have to be uncomfortable. And so I encourage, you know, not only white people, but white people to have those uncomfortable conversations, because oftentimes there's a lot of generational, you know, trauma and like racism, internalized racism in our own family, in our own culture. Right. So I always encourage uncomfortable conversations, you know, in your school settings, at your dinner tables, right, with your friends, you know, with the cute barista at the coffee shop, right? I always really encourage those conversations because that's ultimately how we're going to make change. You know, I think we've really allowed people to be comfortable for far too long.
Thank you, panelists. This question is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, but how can we listen to those people who are calling us out? If, let's say, we're on the opposite side and people are telling us that there's an issue in our community or institution, how can we listen to those people and uplift their voices?
Can you restate the question one more time?
Yeah. How can we listen to those people who are calling us out? Whether it be with our own prejudice or situations or issues that we have.
I think going off of this, I think the biggest thing to consider is always to check your privilege. I think that's one of the bigger things, and it can be easy as maybe thinking about like what you're actually able to do. Okay, I'm able to go to the school that I am able to go to and work to receive this degree. I'm able to get out of my bed. I'm able to eat the food that I'm able to eat. Even though these are small, these are all like privileges that not everyone has. And when you begin to first think at a small level and then expand that to issues related to social justice and racial identities and how that affects actual people's lives, then I think you're then able to try to develop an understanding of, okay, maybe I should try to understand a certain situation in this manner. And so, I'm sorry, I was going in a certain direction. Could you say the question again one more time?
Yeah. How can we listen to those people who are calling us out? I think the first
Yes,
portion.
okay. Perfect. Okay, yeah, now I remember. And so when you're first doing that and you have that understanding and you've done that reflection, I think then you're better able to actually be in a position to help out different organizations or different groups to actually complete or work towards their goal. I think one thing that I'm doing back at CMU is we're trying to develop this partnership with how to educate current and past individuals within the prison system. And so obviously I don't know that much about the prison system. Obviously I've never been to prison and things like that, but you have to realize that whatever you do is not going to fix, you can maybe, obviously you can tutor, you can help people, but it's not going to fix the overall system, right? And so I think going into it with that and ensuring that, okay, I'm going into this to actually listen to these individuals and in order to better advocate for them, I think that's the best way to actually go about it.
I'll chime in. So Uche just said, first of all, we need to listen and acknowledge our own privilege. Frank said we need to have these courageous conversations. I'm going to add, it's really on a micro level, acknowledging all of our biases that we carry with us every single day into every area of our life. And when someone calls us out, instead of getting defensive, we really need to switch to reflective mode. And just as simple as, imagine if we could react to every time a bias gets called out the same way that we would react to someone asking us what flavor ice cream do we love most? And why not this one? So why do I love chocolate more than I love vanilla? If somebody said, well, you don't like chocolate, I love vanilla, how, or whatever, like that is such a small conversation that I still have to stop and reflect on, why do I love chocolate? Why don't I like vanilla? Is it a thing? Did I have a bad experience with vanilla? Did it give me a tummy ache one time? Did something happen in second grade? Maybe little Susie spilled vanilla ice cream all over my uniform at school, and I'm carrying that around with me for the next 30 years of my life. That's really how biases work, and they can be so small and inconsequential, and it's so easy for us to just stop and reflect on it. But when it's something bigger, we get really defensive because we feel really triggered, and we feel that this is a part of our identity and who we are. And I think the biggest shift that we need to make on a micro level is just accepting that we have these biases, and every single day, whenever the opportunity arises, it's okay to stop and reflect and be like, is that a thing? Am I being biased right now? Do I have a bias? Maybe it is a thing. Maybe it's not a thing. Maybe I just like vanilla, or maybe I just like chocolate and it's nothing. And then I can brush it off and we can move on with our lives. But we really need to be that reflective about everything in our lives and be okay with people calling us out and pushing us to think. We live in a society where we are not comfortable getting our thinking pushed. And some people aren't comfortable because they're used to YouTube or whatever telling them what to think, and when you dig deeper, there's not a whole lot there. Other people aren't comfortable because maybe they've never been challenged that way. So if we really want to support people and supporting these differences and calling out our biases, we need to listen. We need to create the space for those courageous conversations, and we need to be willing to be reflective. And then finally, at a macro level, such as your institution or your university, what are you doing with all this feedback that people are giving you? If you're hearing from a certain group that something's not right or something's making them feel a certain way, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to be transparent in your decision-making process to let them know that they have been heard and there are actionable steps you are taking moving forward?
So thank you for those responses. So another question, like helping to keep all of these things like accountable and making sure, as we talked about, trying to make things codified into systemic change and helping to change others' opinions. What are some things to ensure your policies and initiatives are trackable? Like how are those metrics obtained, and what do you look for?
Sure, I guess I'll start off. So in terms of how do you find those metrics? Well, you look at it as an institution, you look at what is your business model, and who are your customers, who are the people you're serving. It starts by examining, it starts with the who, examining both who you are personally, who the institution is, and then that's the way those metrics should develop. Then you can hold yourself and the institution accountable by ensuring that you have a transparent coalition that can keep your institution accountable, whether that be, for example, at a higher education level for students that could be students at a higher education level, that could be staff. I guess the point I'd like to make is the onus is on us to help push forward and challenge universities and other institutions to continue to own up to the metrics that they say they care about, but not only push them to own up to it, push them to do better. And I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, it starts by understanding the data. So another rapid fire fact I just want to spit at you is just, for example, this. We know that Facebook's diversity stats are abysmal. So they have started with about 3% Black in terms of their workforce, and when they started reporting around 2013 or 2014, that's only increased to about 3.8% since the mid 2000s. That's a clear example of an organization that's not holding itself accountable and doesn't have people to hold itself accountable in the way it needs to. So I think that in order to change that, we as people really need to know that information. And when we have information, we can make the changes that we need to make.
Yeah, I think going off of that, Naeem really talked about transparency. I think that's the biggest thing that you really need, especially when in a university setting. I think a lot of students, especially underrepresented students, they will be in many situations where they have been calling for certain type of initiatives or programs to be made within their school. However, they'll either hear back from, oh, we're working on this, or oh, just give us some more time. And sometimes they need that data, or the students want that data to sort of see, okay, where are you guys at with what you guys said you would do? And it's not there, and it can be very frustrating. And so if students aren't seeing that, and if the school isn't publicly putting it out there, that information out there as to where they stand with the initiatives that they said they would do for quite some time, then it creates this aspect of mistrust. And so going back into an idea of some type of coalition or some type of organization that's able to oversee and ensure that they're actually encouraging these actual initiatives, the organization or the university has to give that coalition or that individual the actual freedom to do so. They can't be someone who is, okay, yeah, we're giving you this position, but really you're only doing this. They have to give them full autonomy, full freedom to actually perform their job to the best of their ability so that they can actually keep the university or that organization accountable to raise a certain amount of Black students or a certain amount of LGBTQ people within a given space.
Thank you, panelists. I think you kind of covered and touched on this question, Uche, but this is a question from the audience. When getting involved in organizations or groups dedicated to increasing equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, how do you ensure your policies and initiatives are actually trackable? How do you know your efforts are actually working?
I think a lot of it is what Uche just said, but also, going back to identifying what's not working and what would it look like if it was. And I think that'll give you some of the metrics that Naeem was mentioning. Organization I can think of off the top of my head that does a great job doing that is the nonprofit 100K in 10. They're dedicated to having effective STEM teachers in the classroom to promote more students to go into STEM fields. And they identified their 100 grand challenges. So if we want tomorrow's innovators to come from the classrooms of today, what do those classrooms need to look like? And every year they publish where they are with those 100 challenges, the work that they did in the past year to move the needle forward, and what's still lacking or what's still missing. So I think identifying the inequities and seeing what the vision should be in an ideal world will help develop those metrics and figure out what we need to do to move those things forward, and then staying committed to it. I talk a lot about sustainability, not in the engineering sense, but in the program sense. So sustainability and scalability. When we're talking with districts, they have a lot of grand ideas, but is it sustainable and is it scalable? So I can't just have it work at, one classroom or one school. I need it to be able to carry over throughout a whole university or a whole school district or whatever it may be. So looking at those metrics and really having honest conversations. What do we need to make this sustainable, regardless of leadership changes? Because it should be tied to your institution's missions and goals. And then, is it scalable? Are we going to be able to make this big enough? Sometimes people have really great ideas, but they're very costly. So I think those are all questions that need to be asked when you're bringing people to the table to help define the inequities, the metrics, and figure out how to move forward.
Thank you. Another question from the audience. How can we do better to bring in conversations about LGBTQ+ inequalities and lack of representation without feeling like we are trying to step on or over the racial injustices? What can we do to push the conversations for both?
That's kind of a tough question. I'm thinking about more of like the voices that are being amplified, right? If you take a look around and let's say you're having an event or event of speakers that are going to come to speak to your club, for example, you look at the people who are represented there, and you have maybe you have all Latino people that are going to be speaking. Great, right? But who's missing, right? Do we have a Latino like trans person? Do we have other marginalized like people like represented aside from race, and so that's what's important, right? And that's what myself and especially like I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of our youth in our program too, of like that's what we look for, right? As as a collective of oh great, like here's a Latino person, right? Like I would have loved to see a queer Latino person, right, speaking, or we're reading this book in class and it's written by an LGBT author. I would have loved if this person also happened to be Black, right? Like, and so we make initiatives to have our like reflections of around culture or in race, but not necessarily, things around like LGBT people, right? Or other, marginalized communities. And so I always like really see it as something that should be, held together in that, of being reflected of like queer, trans, like, and POC, right? Because we exist, we're out there, but it's a matter of bringing those voices, to the forefront, in addition to other voices of color as well.
Thank you, panelists, for such a meaningful conversation. I know I really enjoyed listening to all of you and hearing all of your perspectives. But it's time for us to wrap up now. So each of our panelists, I hope you can give us just a closing statement, and we can start with Naeem.
Great. So I just want to close by saying a few things. Number one, STEM dominates our economy and society. We know that 600 billionaires increased their wealth by 434 billion. And of those billionaires at the top were who? Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook and Jeff Bezos of Amazon. But at the same time, our society can figure out how to increase wealth, but we can't seem to figure out how to increase STEM achievement, STEM literacy achievement. For example, the 2018 PISA scores show us that K through 12 achievement in the US is abysmal and is even worse for Hispanic and Black communities who are consistently under the averages of the US. And even though those outcomes are poor, and even though the wealth is concentrated in certain areas, I just want to tell you that we have everything that we need to make the change. We have everything that we need to reduce disparities. We have everything we need to improve outcomes. And we can do that by having a clear vision, utilizing data, and building coalitions.
Thank you, Naeem. Now, Uche.
So yeah, I think for me, first of all, thank you again. I really appreciate the opportunity to actually have this conversation with you all. And I think everyone here was so great. I think the biggest thing that I want to drive is really education. I think with engineers, it's very easy to focus on the equations and the algorithms that you'll be working on, whether it be for your homework or for your research or for your degree. But outside of that, be sure to educate yourself with what's happening within the world, and especially history. I think if people could understand the history of why the things that are happening are happening now and where they stem from, where they root from, I feel as if that would actually help with facing and defeating these racial disparities. And so understanding that history and then also relating it back to your own field of study. Again, as Naeem sort of brought up, how people are creating algorithms that, or equipment that can't detect black skin. There's a reason for that. And again, if you go back to history and if you realize who actually makes the technology. And so I think the biggest thing I would just want to say is, again, just educate yourself and always be willing to learn more and get out your comfort zone.
Thank you, Uche. Now, Frank.
Okay, so, I think really what I really encourage people, aside from having uncomfortable conversations with people, is when you find yourself at a seat at the table and look around and see who's missing, right? If you have a seat at the table, that means you have the privilege to bring people also to that table. So I really encourage the uncomfortable conversations and bringing people into the table.
Thank you, Frank. Last but not least, Michelle.
Frank took my words. That was so good. I've been very fortunate to be brought to the table by others who were looking at who was missing and decided to include me and give me a seat at the table. And I'm very fortunate for those people. And I know you're students now, but eventually you're going to be going on and you're going to be sitting at the table. And it's so important we take a moment, one, to recognize our own privilege that got us there, but also to invite others who are missing to the table. And like I said, every single day, reflect on your own biases. It's affecting every area of your life. And, there's a lot of technology out there that is driving even more biases, whether it's social media and telling you what to shop or what to wear. It's all around us. So all we can do is be cognizant of it and make sure that we are choosing the life that we're living and really being active thinkers and holding complex ideas in our hands at once and being able to look at multiple sides of a situation and come up with our own creative solutions.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, panelists, for making the time today from your busy schedules to join us from across the country, for sharing your stories and helping us further the conversation on such important issues during such an important time in our history.
Thank you to our students and everyone across the world for tuning in. This event, again, has been recorded and will be posted up soon on our website at scu.edu/engineering/diversity/council.
A reminder to all our Santa Clara University students on the call, if you are interested in speaking more with our panelists, remember to join us on Zoom shortly after the conclusion of this event for our special Talk After Walk event with our panelists. The Zoom link was shared in your SCU email this morning by Ricardo Padilla, Jr.
And to the general public watching our live stream, we hope you all leave here today with more tools to turn our thoughts, words, into meaningful action. And some of the takeaways that we have from this are, we talked about utilizing the mission of institutions to tie them into diversity efforts, being proactive, not reactive. And we also talked a little bit about how to go beyond preaching to the choir and meeting people where they're at and utilizing your special skills to enact change. So we had great conversations here, and we hope we can use these to help build up our community.
Please do not forget to mark your calendars and join again on Thursday, November 12th at 6 p.m. Pacific for our next live panel discussion featuring recording artist and songwriter Brookfield Deuce,
Board President Billy DeFrank, and LGBTQ plus Community Center Gabrielle Antolovic,
Artistic Director and Executive Producer of SF Carnival, and the founder of Mission Food Hub in San Francisco, Roberto Hernandez.
And our final panelist, the first Hispanic woman to go to space, a veteran astronaut, and the 11th director of the Johnson Space Center, Ellen Ochoa. So please help spread the word and be on the lookout for more promo materials coming out soon on social media. And finally, we want to leave you with a few quotes. Real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. And that's from late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
It is time for parents to teach young people early on that in diversity, there is beauty and there is strength. Maya Angelou. And once again, thank you so much to our panelists. See you all on November 12th, and good night.